Today we're ranking the hardest midheaven signs. Keep in mind that this is similar to but slightly different than ranking the best or most powerful midheaven signs. This is not exactly that. This is going to be easiest to hardest. And before we begin, let's look at what is the midheaven. Midheaven is always at or near the top of the chart, and it represents how we deal with the most public part of our lives. So it's our reputation, our career, it's how we assert ourselves into the world. So having a midheaven that isn't a sign that is ambitious or, has good public relations, deals with others very well, handles attention well. These are all things that are going to make your midheaven sign much easier, as opposed to having midheaven in a sign that is directionless or lacks ambition. Signs that are more kind of go with the flow, adaptable, accommodating, those may be more difficult to have your midheaven in, generally speaking. Okay, so let's get into it. And I'm going to do this in no particular order. Let's start with Leo. So I think this is a really great sign, really easy sign to have the midheaven in. Leo is ambitious. Leo is very outgoing, very outspoken. Leo is a leader sign. So having midheaven in Leo shows that you will be comfortable with, being in the limelight, handling a lot of attention. You're going to handle attention very well. You're going to have a very, what's the word? Like a very out there, very auspicious, kind of dominant reputation. So you're going to be very vocal. You're going to be very visible. Others will see you. Others will hear you. Others will enjoy your company, your great energy. And again, I don't remember if I touched on this, but Leo is very ambitious. There's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of creativity there. So you can do a lot of different things with this. If you have Leo midheaven, you could be a leader of some kind. You could handle some level of responsibility. You could be someone who's a speaker, or you could also be an entertainer, a performer. There's a whole bunch of things you could do here. The only, I'm actually gonna put this in the easy category. The only reason why I didn't put it in the easiest category is because keep in mind that I can't help but to also focus on where the IC is in the chart. So for those of you who don't know, the IC, or imum coeli, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce that, but it's exactly opposite the midheaven at all times. So in a way, this isn't just about the midheaven. At least that's how I see it. I hate to complicate things, but I also can't ignore this. If you have Leo midheaven, 100% of the time you're going to have Aquarius IC. IC has to do with the home life, how you relate to home and private matters. And to me, it's a bit odd to have Aquarius, to have IC in Aquarius, because this means that the way you relate to your home life and your family is going to be very detached. So I feel, I can't help but to ignore that there could be some difficulty there, not in the midheaven itself, but in the, opposite, in the tail end that it implies, if that makes sense. So that's really the main potential challenge I could see. It doesn't even really have to do with Leo midheaven itself. It has to do with this other, part of it, the other side of the coin, I guess you could say. Let's go to Virgo next. So Virgo is interesting. Virgo is very hardworking, very industrious. It is a very productive sign, so I think that's really great to have for a midheaven. You can be, you can accomplish a lot with Virgo midheaven. Very detailed, very reliable. Others will see you as reliable and accountable, so that's really great. Others will notice your intelligence as well, so that is, there's a lot of excellent tools at your disposal, I guess, if you have Virgo midheaven. On the other hand, though, Virgo is all about service. Virgo is very modest, very humble. Virgo really doesn't handle attention very well. It is, usually more behind the scenes. That doesn't mean that you can't have a rewarding and successful life if you have Virgo midheaven, but it does, I think, somewhat. How do I put this? It can sometimes limit your abilities, depending on, of course, what else is in the rest of your chart and how those dynamics work. But you're not going to be this sunshiny, outgoing personality that you may have if you have Leo midheaven, for example. Also, Virgo midheaven shows that you're generally going to want stability and security. So, all in all, this really paints the picture of someone who is more secure being an employee rather than an employer. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. Again, you can have a very successful life doing that. There's a lot of really great positions that you can have that allow that security and comfort where you don't have to take risks, you don't have to be on your own, but you can still be very successful. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to easiest or hardest midheaven, I do think, again, I think that kind of limits the possibilities that you have. It limits some of the opportunities, I think. Virgo midheaven to me doesn't suggest someone who's going to be, a leader or, run their own industry or something. If they are a leader, they're probably going to do so later in life because that's how Virgo tends to do things. It wants to really master whatever it's doing before it rises to prominence in that area. That's generally how things go. And again, there's nothing wrong with that kind of slow and steady approach. But again, there are other signs you could have the midheaven in that are going to become a leader much more rapidly and hold these positions of power. So nothing wrong with either one. Neither is superior or inferior, but having these more, out there kind of brash midheaven signs to me would actually be easier rather than these kind of security loving positions such as Virgo midheaven. So hopefully that makes sense. All in all, I'm going to put it in the average category. This is a great position for, if you want someone who is attentive to detail, who is, going to be a really great journalist, accountant, something like that, someone who handles those details, that's going to be Virgo midheaven. Let's jump around a little bit here. Let's go to Capricorn midheaven. So in some ways, Capricorn midheaven is very similar to Virgo. Both are Earth signs. Capricorn midheaven is going to show someone who doesn't take a lot of risks with their career. And so that I think depending on the nature of the dynamic, that can sometimes hinder someone. Like I think when it comes to risks, just like anything, it's all about balance. You want to take enough risk to really get yourself out there and seize those really great opportunities, but you also want to, of course, be cautious. You can't be too bold or too, impulsive because otherwise you will be seen as such when it comes to your midheaven, and that can hinder your opportunities as well. So Capricorn definitely does lie more on the side of being very cautious, having a slow, steady approach. However, Capricorn midheaven is actually ideal because oftentimes, not always, it depends on the house system, maybe it depends on the latitude that you're born at, but oftentimes Capricorn midheaven, you'll have Aries rising. So that not to get too, sidetracked into these other points, but this means that you'll have a really great, you'll approach things head on and have a really great, first impression. You'll feel natural, in new situations. Capricorn midheaven is going to show someone who definitely isn't the flashiest personality. They may not be super charismatic necessarily. They may come across as kind of dry or even cold in public situations, and they can be very private as well in public. But this is actually one of the key elements of being a really successful celebrity or politician. You have to know what to keep private and what to put on display. When your entire life is on display, you have to know which things to express in a selective way or which things to keep entirely private. And Capricorn midheaven thrives with that. Also, Capricorn is, of course, a very industrious sign, very ambitious. And so, having Capricorn midheaven, you're going to be seen as such. You'll be seen as ambitious. You'll be seen as a leader as well. And I think that's a huge difference between Virgo midheaven. Capricorn isn't going to be content just servicing others all the time. Capricorn midheaven is, to me, it indicates someone who feels comfortable running their own show, running their own business, being the leader of at least, of a division or or a leader of their entire organization. Okay, so not to ramble on too much about that, but I am going to put Capricorn midheaven in the easiest category. And not to make this too subjective or personal, but this is my own midheaven, and it's something that I haven't always enjoyed, or I haven't always seen the plus side of it. I sort of more so admire these fire midheavens that are so charismatic. I think that would be a lot more fun and, in a way, a lot more immediately satisfying. However, midheaven, depending on the house system you use, it's often the 10th house cusp. So the midheaven sort of corresponds to Capricorn. The 10th house corresponds to Capricorn, if that makes sense. So that in itself, to me, indicates that Capricorn midheaven is ideal. Are you going to be the most fun, popular person right off the bat? No. But with Capricorn, everything takes time. It becomes, more successful, more enjoyable over time. And so this is also showing, someone with Capricorn midheaven is going to become generally much more successful later in life and rise to prominence gradually over time, which again may not be the most fun dynamic, but it is something that to me indicates a powerful dynamic. I could go on and on about this, but I'm going to move on. Let's go to Scorpio, because to me, going from Capricorn to Scorpio, Scorpio is so similar and yet so different from Capricorn. So when I was kind of going over my notes before the video and deciding how I would rank these positions, I almost put Scorpio midheaven in the easiest category, but I'm actually not going to do that. My thinking goes kind of like this. So Scorpio midheaven, Scorpio has a lot of what we are wanting, or what I'm wanting, when it comes to an easy midheaven. Scorpio is very ambitious. It's a great sign for being a leader. Scorpio is not afraid to stand out. They're not afraid to have an unpopular opinion. So that could potentially damage their reputation. But on the other hand, many of us enjoy an outcast, a rebel, sort of. And Scorpio is a very strong-willed sign. They're not going to budge. They're going to keep their position. So of course, I think that's also an excellent quality of a leader. They need to have they need to express themselves in a way that is clear and doesn't constantly change too much, because then it will muddle it'll I think if you're a leader, you have to have a position that's very easy for others to understand. That way others can follow you in a way that is natural and clear to them, if that makes sense. So Scorpio midheaven, great midheaven for a leader. Scorpio, not only is it a very ambitious industrial sign, it also has many different strengths at its disposal. It's very analytical and, logically intelligent. It can handle a lot of rational analysis, but it's also, fundamentally emotional. It's very intuitive. It can perceive threats very well. It can perceive others, can understand complex systems. So, having Scorpio midheaven could be really great if you are running a complex business or dealing with many different variables. If you have to have a really deep level of understanding of, I don't know, anything. If you're running a complex business or dealing with many different, like if you're running a country, for example, and dealing with all these different variables of a whole nation, or even if you're just a paramedic or psychologist, you have to understand the human body or the human mind, in addition to maybe outside variables as well, things like that. Anything involving this like high degree of attention and understanding, Scorpio midheaven's going to thrive with any of that. What else? The main reason why I didn't put this in the easiest category, why is that? I don't even remember. Scorpio midheaven, I think mainly it's just in the level of emotion that Scorpio has. Scorpio they can come across emotionless sometimes, because they want to keep all that emotion inside. They don't want to be emotionally vulnerable. So that also is a great aspect of having an easy midheaven. Scorpio midheaven, like Capricorn midheaven, they're going to keep a lot private, and that can be actually really advantageous for having a very high, public profile. On the other hand, though, being so emotional, having the most public part of you being so fundamentally emotional and emotionally intense, I think that can be difficult. You may feel very vulnerable if, like, it's very kind of difficult, because on the one hand, Scorpio midheaven is going to want power. They're going to want, status, and they're going to be very capable of achieving that. However, on the other hand, the more public they get, the more vulnerable they're going to feel, because the more vulnerable they are, the more at risk they are. And so it's almost like a catch 22. The more powerful they become, the more paranoid they may become, if that makes sense. So again, this is part of just having such an emotional part of you on display all the time. This can be very difficult, if that makes sense. So that's the only kind of dynamic that makes me rank this less easy than the absolute easiest category. But overall, midheaven in Scorpio, this is a generally easy, favorable placement, with a few caveats. Okay, let's go to Gemini. So this is an interesting one. Gemini midheaven to me shows someone who can have success in a lot of different areas. So right off the bat, that sounds really great. You know, you don't have to be in a super niche area. You may have a very successful career in one industry and then move on to something completely different and add that to your resume, I guess you could say. So that sounds, really great. I think to have that level of adaptability. Gemini is also a very intellectual sign, very intelligent. So with Gemini midheaven, you're going to get a lot of, I don't know, things having to do with analysis or communication. So to me, Gemini midheaven represents the broadcaster, someone who is, a journalist, a news anchor, someone who is a teacher, professor, writer, something along those lines. So there's a lot of different areas. You don't even have to necessarily do any of those. It could be something completely different if you have Gemini midheaven. I think the difficulty comes from having such a wide range. Again, like I said, if you want a really easy, if you want a powerful midheaven, and if you want that power to come in an easy way, it's it's gonna be a lot more natural to have your midheaven in a sign that is very strong-willed and is a little bit more consistent. Because again, to be a powerful leader, to have a strong reputation, you're gonna want an easy, a simple platform, a simple, I don't know. You're going to want to communicate in a way that is simple for others to understand so that they can follow you. Gemini is not a simple sign at all. It's constantly changing its mind. It's constantly changing. It's again very adaptable. So this to me would be very difficult for someone who wants, a high level of status or power, especially, in the realms of being a leader, because typically to get those things, you're going to need to be a leader in some kind of way. And to me, Gemini midheaven won't have a clear, concise way of communicating itself. It's not going to be easy to understand. It's not going to be easy for others to follow. Yes, they can be really great at conveying information and things along those lines, but they're going to be great in things that are constantly changing. Like with, conveying information, the information is constantly changing. And so, they may thrive in that type of area. But again, like on the one hand, Gemini midheaven is very, has so many different areas it can thrive in. But on the other hand, that adaptability itself, in some ways, actually narrows Gemini midheaven's possibilities or opportunities, if that makes sense. They're not going to thrive with having a super strong reputation or handling a lot of attention all the time, if that makes sense. So, Gemini midheaven, I'm actually gonna put in the hard category. I'm sorry, my arrow's in the wrong place. My clicker. Okay. And yeah, initially I put it in the neutral or average category, but I think Gemini midheaven is actually more difficult. Gemini as a sign really doesn't correspond to any of the themes that midheaven has to do with. Very few of them, I would say. Let's go to Cancer next. So oftentimes, if you have Libra rising, you will have Cancer midheaven, and to me, this is difficult. The rising and the midheaven and these other points don't have any signs of domicile or detriment, but I consider Libra rising as being similar to being in detriment. It's opposing Aries rising, which to me would be, similar to being in domicile. Same with Cancer midheaven. If Capricorn midheaven is, very strong, it's very like fitting, I guess you could say. Cancer midheaven is going to be the opposite of that. It's going to be a little bit unusual or abnormal, because Cancer has to do with, your home life, your private life, and midheaven has to do with exactly opposite that. It's your public life, it's your reputation. So how does that work if you have Cancer midheaven? Oftentimes, not always, but most people, I would say, who have Cancer midheaven, they're gonna have careers involving home or family, and this could happen, in many different types of ways. You're gonna be, I don't know, you're gonna work from home, you're gonna work in other people's homes, you're gonna design homes, clean homes. There's so many different possibilities. I don't know why it always ends up being, not always, but oftentimes ends up being about the home though. Or, and this leads me to some potential strengths here. You may just make your workplace feel a little bit more like a family, which can actually, in kind of an in sort of a backwards way, this can actually be very powerful or functional. Cancer is the sign of the mother, and the mother, in a way, is kind of like, at least in a traditional sense, it's sort of like the leader. Mother is the leader or the manager, I guess you could say, of the home. So having that approach and applying it to a more public, workspace or to the world is actually not the uh, worst way about going about things. You're gonna still have those like management or leadership skills that just like a mother would. It's just that you're approaching this from a more kind of emotional, more soft position, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. I've seen many people who have strong Cancer placements, such as Cancer midheaven, being leaders, being managers, usually more on the low end of things. They're not necessarily, to me, they don't often correlate to like CEOs or presidents or necessarily things like that, because Cancer is a very humble sign. Cancer midheaven, basically, in short, Cancer midheaven, yes, you're gonna have really great leadership skills. You're gonna lead with emotion. You're going to, in a way, you're going to really affect the feeling of the workplace, and that has a lot of value that, impacts everything and impacts all the operations. So there's a lot of strength there. But again, there's also this high level of emotion and this humility that will keep things kind of down to earth, in some ways kind of potentially limit certain opportunities that you could have, I guess. So overall, Cancer midheaven, I'm actually gonna put in the neutral or average category. Like I said, it is in some ways almost kind of similar to being in detriment. It is sort of backwards, but that's not necessarily always a bad thing. There's also potential there as well. There's some leadership capabilities there, if that makes sense. Okay, let's move on to, I don't know. Let's do Aquarius. So Aquarius is interesting as a midheaven. Aquarius is ruled by Saturn, so it's a little bit similar to Capricorn. I'm just to give it away here. I'm going to put it in the easiest category. Why did I do that? So Aquarius is a little bit similar to Capricorn just because it's ruled by Saturn. And having a Saturn ruled midheaven, on the one hand, yes, you are going to have many challenges and delays when it comes to your public life and reputation. Many of your most difficult experiences may happen to you in public, but that is valuable. That in itself is valuable because if you're challenged in this particular area, for example, if you're challenged in your public life and your reputation, over time that will make you better, that will make you stronger, that will make you more resilient. And so, these midheaven signs may not be easiest in the sense of, they may not be the initially easiest, I guess you could say, but over time this is indicating, Capricorn or Aquarius midheaven indicate a public life and reputation that will naturally get easier. At least that's how we kind of perceive it, because first you get used to the challenges, and then once you get used to that and therefore become better, then you become stronger, more powerful, more potent, and success seems to just come to you easier and easier. But it's not actually things getting easier, it's just that you've become better in response to those challenges, if that makes sense. So similar to Capricorn midheaven, that's how Aquarius midheaven is as well. Aquarius midheaven has some perks that Capricorn midheaven doesn't, though. Aquarius is a very open sign. It does have some flexibility since it is air. Aquarius is, because Aquarius is air, it's an intellectual energy. So Aquarius midheaven can thrive with a lot more intellectual positions, I think more so than Capricorn midheaven. But Aquarius midheaven, because it's ruled by Saturn, there's also a lot of authoritative energy there as well. So if you have midheaven in Capricorn or Aquarius, you're going to come across like you know what you're talking about. You're going to come across experienced. And again, it's because you are oftentimes experienced because you've gone through a lot of challenges and trials and tribulations. What else? Aquarius midheaven also thrives with dealing with many different kinds of people from all walks of life. So to me, Aquarius midheaven could be a really great leader. Again, someone who deals with many different kinds of people, someone who, manages large projects. Another thing with having a Saturn ruled midheaven is that you'll be seen as focusing on the long term. With your career and reputation, you'll be very goal oriented. You'll naturally you'll think holistically. You'll take into account many different variables and you'll project your goals into the far future. So, again, huge strengths when it comes to, someone who has a large profile, someone who has a lot of responsibility, a lot on their shoulders, etc. Um, but yeah, just to summarize this, I think main key differences between Capricorn and Aquarius, since I keep comparing them, Aquarius midheaven really great socially. I think maybe a little bit more so than Capricorn midheaven. Socially, intellectually, you know, they have this strength of being a bit flexible enough to communicate with many different types of people, but firm enough, since Aquarius is a fixed sign, firm enough to have that consistent communication, consistent manner of doing things in order to be easy to understand, I guess you could say. Because Aquarius is consistent, it will make others understand them in a natural type of way, and therefore make it easier for others to follow Aquarius midheaven's command, or I don't know, their whatever they're doing, their manner of doing things. I don't know. Does that make sense? Hopefully that makes sense. Let's do Libra midheaven. So, so let's go back to what makes a midheaven easy in my eyes. It would be a sign that's ambitious, a sign that's not afraid to stand out, a sign that handles attention very well. Libra midheaven, Libra is a sign that handles attention very well and is really great socially. Libra is an excellent communicator. However, Libra is afraid to stand out. Libra doesn't want to rock the boat. And so Libra midheaven to me indicates someone that is going to be a peacemaker. They're not going to be someone that is of course, unless there's something else going on in the rest of the chart, Libra midheaven isn't to me indicating someone who is, venturing out on their own, being a trailblazer, being a trendsetter, someone who is authoritative, someone who is, uh, pushing through their own agenda or their own vision. Libra midheaven isn't going to really thrive with all of that. This is more to me the energy of a caretaker, someone who is servicing others. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. That is great. But when it comes to easiest midheavens, to me, that's not the easiest sign. If that's the way you assert yourself in public, it's more so by not asserting yourself. This dynamic, it can be favorable in some situations, but overall in a way it's a little bit backward. To me, it's a bit difficult to have compared to other midheaven signs. Overall, I'm going to put it in the hard category next to Gemini. In a way, Libra and Gemini are very similar. uh, both are so flexible and so adaptable, and again, that's a really great skill or strength. But in the realm of your midheaven, of your career and public image, to me, that's not, others will not readily understand you if your position is constantly changing, or if you are so flexible. Others will not understand you. Others may not be inclined to follow your lead. You're not going to be a leader. Also, these signs are really not very ambitious either. Libra to me is one of the least ambitious signs. It more so just wants, peace, and it follows the, what's the word, the path of least resistance. So of course, that is really great in some situations, but again, when it comes to your midheaven, when it comes to your public life and reputation, that's not going to be necessarily the easiest way of doing things, I don't think, especially when it comes to acquiring power or status, becoming a leader, these types of things that to me correlate with having a strong midheaven. So I hope I'm doing this in a way that's easy to understand. I guess easiest or hard midheavens, to me, it does have to do with, having a powerful midheaven in an easy type of way. I don't know. I guess the two are kind of mixed. Let's do Pisces midheaven. So on the one hand, Pisces midheaven, I think, is shared by some individuals who are very creative and broadcast that creative energy. Others may see Pisces midheaven for their creativity, their what's the word? Like Pisces midheaven may be very obscure. They're bringing about something that is very unconventional, very artistic or beautiful or spiritual in nature. So there's a lot of value there. There's a lot of richness in Pisces midheaven. But on the other hand, I'm gonna actually rank Pisces midheaven in the hardest category because Pisces as a sign. Well, first of all, again, you have another sign that is not necessarily ambitious. Pisces, like Gemini or Libra, is a sign that is kind of go with the flow, very adaptable. So, how are you going to know what to pursue? You're not going to have necessarily super strong goals or intentions in mind if you have a midheaven in Pisces, kind of similar to Pisces, to midheaven in Gemini or Libra. Going with the flow, having this go with the flow, adaptable mentality when it comes to your midheaven, when it comes to your public life and reputation, it's actually one of the more difficult ways of going about it. Others will not understand your position because you don't really have a position. Others won't follow your lead. I'm not saying you can't be a powerful person with any midheaven. I'm not trying to, disillusion anyone. Like I said, like Lady Gaga has Pisces midheaven, for example. She's a very successful person. I'm sure there's many, there's people who are extremely successful with any and all midheavens. Okay, so I'm not trying to disillusion or damper anyone's light at all. But ranking easiest to hardest midheavens, to me, Pisces midheaven is going to be very difficult. You won't always know what to pursue or what to assert. You're not going to know how to assert yourself all the time with Pisces midheaven. I think Pisces is one of the least structured signs, most adaptable, but least structured. And so, again, it's just going to be very unclear. Should I pursue this job or that job? How should I convey myself? How should I articulate myself? The Pisces is really not, it doesn't want to tie itself down to anything. It doesn't want to commit to anything really. It's constantly changing. So again, others may not understand your message. Others, to me, this is one of the most difficult signs when it comes to, especially if you want to be a leader or have a really public profile. Another thing too is Pisces as a sign is it lets itself be emotionally vulnerable, which I guess in today's society can definitely be an advantage when it comes to, being charismatic and putting yourself out there. But if you have a really high profile, I think it can be dangerous to just be so transparent. I think that it can be much easier and more advantageous to have these midheavens in private signs, as I mentioned, like Capricorn or Scorpio or even Aquarius. Having midheaven in Pisces, you're going to kind of put everything out there. And this may be difficult. Being transparent can be great in some areas, but in public, in the limelight, others will not always understand. And so that, it can actually be a disadvantage. It can make things harder to be so transparent, if that makes sense. So overall, Pisces midheaven, I'm actually going to rank as the hardest midheaven to have. Okay, we have a few left now. Let's do Sagittarius, I guess. Okay, Sagittarius midheaven. On the one hand, having Sagittarius midheaven, Sagittarius is a sign that really puts itself out there. It handles attention very well. It comes across in a very optimistic and outgoing, charismatic type of way. And so these are all really great strengths for having, Sagittarius midheaven. You're going to come across in a very powerful, oftentimes fun kind of way. Also, just having a midheaven that's in such an outspoken sign, again, I think that's really great for being a leader as well. You're not going to be afraid to put yourself out there and, be a leader, initiate something. So again, really, really great attributes there. The only reason why I didn't rank Sagittarius midheaven higher in terms of its easiness is because Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's adaptable. And by this point, you know my stance on having midheavens in adaptable signs. If you're constantly changing and adapting and even growing, I guess, others may not always understand your point of view. How can they? If you're being a leader, a manager, CEO, president, you have to have some level of consistency in your message. Otherwise, they're not going to understand you. They're not going to naturally follow you. You have to be very clear, black and white in your approach to things. And Sagittarius, on the one hand, it can be very outspoken and speak with conviction. But again, on the other hand, they're also constantly changing. They're, multifaceted, and that's great in some regards, but to me it's difficult when it comes to the midheaven, if that makes sense. Um yeah, pretty much just that. That's the main thing really that makes Sagittarius midheaven difficult. Lacking that structure, not really knowing which position to pursue or which message to convey, how to convey it. Your Sagittarius can be a bit indecisive, so that's going to make your midheaven much more difficult. And notice too, all the mutable signs I ranked average at best. Mutable midheavens, it's just a difficult place to have that mutable, changeable energy. Midheaven is more comfortable, I guess you could say. It's naturally stronger in signs that are cardinal or fixed because those are the leader signs, those are the consistent signs, the ambitious signs, generally speaking. Um, Sagittarius and Virgo do have some kind of structure to them. They can, be direct with communication, so that I think makes them average overall. But especially Gemini and Pisces, these are the least, structured signs of them all, I would say. So those are kind of the most difficult for midheavens. Lastly are Taurus and Aries. So let's do Taurus first. To me, Taurus is a very auspicious midheaven to have, very easy. When I see Taurus midheaven in a reading, in some ways it's actually difficult to read because you can be so successful in so many different areas with Taurus midheaven. Taurus midheaven shows that you are reliable, you're accountable, and others see you as such as well. You can be great in many different positions because of that stability, because of that fixed nature of Taurus midheaven. Also, Taurus is a very practical sign, so you're going to be seen as very practical, no nonsense, great common sense. All these attributes will really shine through your midheaven if it's in Taurus. Another thing too is Venus rules Taurus. So if you have Taurus midheaven, this means Venus rules over your midheaven. This means that you are charismatic. Others find you to be easy to be around. So Taurus midheaven has this what's the word? This kind of perfect balance between being very logical and rational, but also being easy to be around. Taurus is logical like Virgo, but easy to be around almost like Leo. So it's like this happy medium. It's this happy kind of balance between all of that. So this is great. What could go wrong? I almost rank Taurus midheaven as easiest. But like I mentioned with some other midheaven signs, Taurus midheaven, and it means that you have Scorpio IC, and this, to me, this veers this whole dynamic in a completely different direction. Remember, midheaven is the public life, your reputation. Exactly opposite that is the IC. It's the home life. It's the more private part of life. And if you have Taurus midheaven, 100% of the time you're going to have Scorpio IC. Scorpio is emotionally intense. It's I don't know. It brings this intense energy into your home life and your private life, and to me, that's where the difficulty comes in. So yes, Taurus midheaven in many ways seems perfect. It seems like this perfect balance, this perfect reputation, grounded, responsible, likable, so perfect almost with your public life and reputation. But again, beneath that, there's this intensity in your home life if you have Taurus midheaven. So again, we are getting slightly off topic because this doesn't strictly just have to do with the midheaven, but I can't help but to take it into account since it is part of the same thing. The midheaven and the IC are almost like two sides of the same coin. they are inseparable, I guess you could say. So that is why I'm putting Taurus midheaven in easy and not in the easiest category. Lastly is Aries. So Aries midheaven, this is another one that's very auspicious, and I'm running out of room. I'm going to move myself around here. Um, yeah, very auspicious. So Aries midheaven to me represents someone who is a leader for sure. Someone who, this person is ambitious, they're bold, they are risk taking at times. They want power, they want status. So, you have all these themes that to me correlate kind of perfectly with what the midheaven represents. This is someone that will speak with conviction. They're going to put themselves out there. They're not afraid to be a leader. They actually need to be a leader in many different areas. They're either going to run their own business, run their own organization, or they at least need to have some level of sovereignty to stay sane and to stay, happy. They're going to need to be a manager. They're going to need some kind of responsibility and some kind of autonomy. Okay, so this is really great. Why would I not rank it as the easiest midheaven? I think the only thing keeping this from being the easiest is because, okay, how do I put this? Midheaven does thrive in signs that, are leader signs, okay? But I think to be a highly effective leader, you actually need to also know when to follow at certain times. Okay. So, like, for example, Capricorn midheaven, Aquarius midheaven, they are leaders. They want to be in charge. They desire that, being on top, that leadership, etc. But they also know when to follow, if that makes sense. They know when to kind of bite their tongue. I don't know if that's the right phrase. They know when to kind of be private or kind of be, play it cool, I guess you could say, in order to be a leader in the long run. Aries midheaven doesn't necessarily have that level of foresight. They always want to be a leader right away. They always want to be outspoken in the moment, and that can, lead to some maybe, close off certain opportunities in the long run. Also, it's just going to be difficult in some ways because Aries midheaven, lacking that, needing on such a instinctive level, requiring that level of autonomy right off the bat. It's going to be difficult, I think, early in life as well, when you start out life with limited skills, limited experience, and you're already demanding that leadership. In some areas you can definitely do that and thrive right away, but in other areas this could be very difficult as well. Others may not always understand or respect the level of confidence that you have right off the bat. But on the other hand, confidence can get you a long way too. I've heard from many people who have Aries midheaven that they often have times where they start their first job and they quit right away because the minute that their manager barks certain orders at them, this is not acceptable to someone who has Aries midheaven. They're only going to follow your lead if, for one, they have some level of autonomy to do their own thing, but also they'll follow your lead if they respect you. And for many of us who have, let's say, like midheaven in Virgo, for example, we understand that sometimes we have to follow orders. That's just the way the system is. That's what the way the world is. But Aries midheaven does not want any of that. You know what I mean? So that is admirable. That can be very powerful in many ways, but can also, I think, make things a little bit difficult, especially early on, if that makes sense. Plus the lack of foresight that Aries midheaven can have. Okay, so this was a bit rambly, but that's how I would rank the easiest and hardest midheavens. This is definitely a little bit subjective. You could kind of move some of these around. So let me know your thoughts or your experiences on these. I would love to hear that. Okay, but thanks for watching. Definitely book a reading with me if you would like. It's what keeps the channel going. It's what allows me to post videos so consistently.